What if the Yamaha YZ250 was fuel injected? Bored out to 300cc, electronic start, oil injected? All of that in the classic Yamaha frame, a chassis adored by many riders around the world. What if Yamaha ever were to update it to give us the bike that so many have been asking for?
What if you could buy that bike today? Just not from Yamaha.
Introducing Fantic, the brand that's making the dream happen for many of us. You've seen them in circuit racing, you've heard their name in the Dakar Rally, but more importantly, who are they? Are they owned by the Chinese? Did they just blatantly copy Yamaha?
Well, let me explain. Because this story goes way deeper than you could ever imagine.
It's a story that ended in America with the news of the Italians bringing over their XC300 two-stroke, also known as people's dream YZ. The more you analyze and look over this bike, the more you realize who Fantic really is. Because while they are bringing two enduro models to the States, this is not Fantic's first dabble with the new world. In fact, it's a story that has its very beginning tied to an American dream. It's a timeline that went full circle, from and to the land of the free. Mario Agrati was a college student finishing his studies. He started working for his family's business, and since they were involved with American markets, Mario got to see the USA and how people lived. And that's when he noticed a trend. Back in the 60s, the American market demanded more and more minibikes, little motorcycles powered by small displacement 4-stroke motors.
But these engines mostly came out of lawnmowers and other utility vehicles. They were never that good. So Mario came up with an idea.
What if he could build a minibike that was, for all intents and purposes, a real motorcycle?
But there was a problem. His family's business was too big to tackle such seemingly insignificant project. So the Italian had to spin off a new company.
Together with Henry Keppel, they set out to produce the best motorcycles they could for the American youth. First, they needed a name. Fantic Motor came about in conversation, but that was just too long and boring. What wasn't boring back then, and quite booming actually, was the popularity of a particular fizzy drink company, Fanta. The Italians put the two and two together, and in 1968, Fantic Motors gained its birth certificate. Fast forward to the modern day Fantic two-stroke. You can see where the Italians really modernized the original base. They added fuel injection, an electronic start, but didn't stop there, as they also engineered an oil injection system and traction control. On a two-stroke, that's quite unheard of. The engineers added an electronic exhaust valve, but its Yamaha influences can still clearly be seen, as its gearbox only features 5 speeds.
And that's the second crucial point in Fantic's story. Because them, together with the Japanese and Minarelli, have a long bit of history on their shoulders. You see, in 2019, Fantic Motors and Yamaha Motor Europe signed a collaboration agreement.
This would see the Italians borrow engine technology for use in their 125 and 250 two-strokes. It allowed them to skip bits of R&D by inspiring themselves from Yamaha frame designs and other technologies. In reality, this deal mainly allowed Fantic to go to market quicker and better. Since these were tried and tested components, they also gained people's trust and dismissed some reliability concerns. And so, in 2021, the first such Fantics came to the market.
That's part of the story. But I was left wondering, what was in it for Yamaha? Why would they do that?
And then you read something else. In 2020, just a year prior, Yamaha decided to transfer all of its shares in the Italian engine builder Minarelli to Fantic Motors.
Again, why would they do that? And who even is Minarelli? Let's take a step back.
Since early 90s, the engine manufacturer started working with Yamaha by supplying small displacement engines for their Zuma and Jog scooters. Their relationship was rock solid, and it ended with the Japanese acquiring the Italians altogether in 2002. Now, suddenly, in 2020, they announced they would sell the entirety of Minarelli to Fantic. I can't find an exact monetary figure, I'm not sure how much Fantic had to pay for it, but this is the missing link. You see, in parallel, Fantic had worked closely with Minarelli for decades. That's how the three manufacturers got closer and closer together. The question still remains, what did Fantic get out of it? On one hand, think of it from a logistic point of view. They're both Italian companies with Italian factories, so trading within each other is easier than ever. This freeway deal also strengthened the relationship between Fantic and Yamaha and allowed the Italians to access more of the Japanese technology stable.
Allegedly, this also brought the Europeans closer to releasing electric versions of their machines. So then, what did Yamaha get out of it?
Here, I can only speculate. Some say the conglomerate wanted to get rid of the responsibility posed by Minarelli, thus allowing them to shift focus to other areas while keeping that door open. Others might say it was a way to bring them closer to Fantic and use the Italians as their premium luxury brand, to try things they could never trial with their own reputation. But honestly, I can't know for sure. What I can say is, it currently allows the three companies to work together, closer than ever before. If we go back to that elusive XC300, the modern day YZ, you can see that while things changed, at its core, the bike is still based on a Yamaha. And I get it that YZ had formed a bit of a cult status, especially in markets like the USA. So Fantic taking that and giving it a modern twist with a hydraulic clutch and other comfort features makes a ton of sense. What's not that clear to me is, where does Fantic position themselves? What's their purpose? They could be the Lexus or Buick of Yamaha, a premium product aimed at a higher-end target market. It could be a testbed for the Japanese to get back into the two-stroke business. It could be developing into a racing arm, utilizing the Italians' legendary pedigree and status. Because maybe you don't know about it, but Fantic is a brand with more history behind it than meets the eye. After the two Italians created the company in '68, they immediately started working on the minibikes.
But actually, the production facility wasn't ready by the time they were taking orders, so they had to contract other factories for a full 6 months to build their machines for them.
Seeing success with those types of vehicles, the Italians pivoted to other leisure vehicles, and that's when they really struck gold. In 1970, they announced the Caballero, a bike that was truly going to put Fantic on the map. Its name came from Keppel's biggest vice, cigarette smoking. In fact, Caballero was his favorite brand of tobacco product. Plus, the name sounded exotic. And while its 50cc engine was anything but, the young audience it targeted absolutely loved the bike. It became an immediate success, and Fantic quickly expanded to offering a wider variety of models and engine capacities. They managed to grow exponentially by upgrading their facilities, while most of their competitors were still stuck with hand-building the machines. With great commercial success came even greater ambitions, and that's when Fantic went racing. Trials was a sport quickly gathering people's eyeballs, so the Italians jumped headfirst into it. They had to modify their existing engines, as initially, Minarelli refused to build them a dedicated one, from a fear of low volumes.
Nevertheless, Fantic gathered multiple world championships, and they didn't stop at trials.
Coming in triumphant in the World Enduro Championship as well. The company grew up to 160 employees, all working in a 20,000 square meter factory. Early 80s looked like nothing could stop on the Italians' brakes. But as the decade came to an end, economic realities came back to bite the company. Reality is, in the late 80s, Fantic was struggling.
Business wasn't booming any longer, and in '87, Fabbrica Motoveicoli SPA gathered managing power over the motorcycle manufacturer. They tried pivoting, turning its fate around, only to, less than a decade later, cease production of all Fantic bikes.
A brand that grew at an astronomical rate managed to fall back down to earth even quicker. It took multiple years for the Italians to find a buyer. Finally, in 2003, Federico Frenan purchased the brand and tried restarting operations. He decided to keep the legendary Caballero name, but this time it was going to be slapped on an enduro bike, not a scrambler.
The problem was, no matter how much Federico tried, he could never bring Fantic back to its glory days.
Over the time he owned the brand, they only managed to manufacture 10,000 units. That's spanning over 12 years.
In its last year, in 2014, the manufacturer had a turnover of less than 1 million euros, while selling 300 motorcycles. No matter how you put it, those are not the numbers of a thriving manufacturer. Not even close.
At this rate, Fantic was on a trajectory leading them straight into the history books. From the outside, you could say they were disorganized, blame management. But according to the company's modern-day CEO, that was not exactly the case. In fact, the operations were pretty clean. The thing is, this resurrection lacked one proper understanding. Motorcycle companies need big cash infusions in order to develop new products, and that's cash that Fantic never had during that time period. To top it all up, this was not Federico's only business endeavor. He was also in charge of Electra, a major player in the coffee machine business. The reality was, by comparison, Fantic was never that important, and so it slowly got neglected. The neglect was put to an end in 2014 when the Veen Network Group acquired the manufacturer. But crucially, this isn't your average private equity looking for a quick cash turnaround. In fact, the group itself only got 10% of the shares, the rest being bought by individual members of said group. Members who, by doing so, put more skin in the game. In 2015, the deal got finalized, but they had to move quickly.
Back then, Fantic only had on offer 50 and 125cc models. But Mariano Roman, their CEO and co-owner, had bigger plans.
He saw in Fantic an opportunity to develop affordable and high-performance vehicles. He saw a chance to take that name back to its glory days. They immediately brought the Caballero name back, but this time closer to its origins, with a flat track and a scrambler version. They offered it in multiple engine choices, from 125 to 250 and 500. Later, they even added a 700. But Mariano was also aware that brand trust takes time that Fantic didn't have. So he went to China and became an Italian importer for MASH motorcycles, affordable bikes that had proved their worth on the French market. That was a great decision, as not long after, Fantic managed to import and sell over 1,000 units in Italy. By the end of 2015, the company's turnover grew by 5 times, and that doubled again in 2016.
In fact, that same year, for the first time in what felt like forever, Fantic made a profit. Okay, that profit was just 260,000 euros, but that's with a plus sign. And then they made a huge announcement.
Their plan wouldn't stop in Italy. It went far beyond Europe's borders, all the way across the ocean. Fantic was going back to America. So, where does that leave us today? The Italians use a variety of engines, from Japanese units to Chinese and Italian ones, built by Minarelli. The later units end up being used in a new line of high-performance dirt bikes developed on Yamaha's platforms. Their income rose to a healthy 156 million euros, and in the span of 5 years, up till today, Fantic had sold more than 15,000 units. And that's just small displacement 50 to 125cc bikes. That's ignoring a lot of Caballero sales and enduro bikes. They went on to sell e-bikes as well. In fact, that's how their US presence originally came to be.
But the Fantic name was never just about affordability or style. It carried a huge echo in racing, and that's a mission that its younger incarnation adopted as well.
With the Yamaha partnership in place, they debuted in Dakar in 2022 with Franco Pico by developing a bespoke 450cc rally weapon that, later on, they decided to sell, joining an exclusive club of manufacturers in doing so. They entered MXGP with a full factory team and even partnered with MotorX for all their racing efforts. And that's how Fantic's story comes back to close the circle. What started with an American dream seemingly continues with a brand chasing back its glory days. And with bikes like their XC300, the Italians are building something people have asked for years. The YZ that Yamaha stubbornly refused to give us. Thanks for watching.